This video will focus on Leica Captivate's 3D viewer. This is the part of the software where we are able to visually inspect and interact with our data. In previous software, this may have been simply referred to as a map. However, with Leica Captivate's ability to display and handle all of its data in 3D, the term map is not enough. So instead, we use 3D viewer. We will begin by looking at zooming and panning in a simple 2D view. We start with a suitable job in the center of the job carousel, and then we can tap on the 3D viewer icon to enter into it. Straight away, we see the data from the job displayed on our screen. In fact, the view that we see when we enter into the 3D viewer for a job is the same view that we last used with that job. In this case, a 2D plan view. Let us now take a look at some of the zooming and panning controls. We will start by tapping the zoom icon on the right-hand toolbar so that a sub-toolbar is displayed. Here we see 4 icons. At the top we have zoom extents. Then we have a real-time zoom where we can drag forwards and backwards to zoom in and out. Then we have a zoom window. And finally a center view control. So now we can have a look at each of these in turn, starting with the real-time zoom. We tap the icon which enables that mode for us, hence the icon now being displayed as highlighted. And now, whenever we drag either up or down the screen, we find ourselves zooming in or zooming out. If we tap the button again to disable it, now none of our zoom features are enabled. So when we tap and drag, we're actually panning. So when no other feature is enabled, a drag gesture simply pans our view. Next, we can use the zoom window feature. Again, as soon as we tap the icon, it becomes highlighted because it is enabled. And we can then define our window by dragging diagonally on the screen. As soon as this is done, Leica Captivate will snap to the required zoom level and position. Next, we can look at the center functionality. To do this, we shall first select a point in the viewer and then use the center icon. As soon as we press this, Leica Captivate automatically pans the view so that our selected object is now in the center of the screen. In some cases, there is even a second center option, which allows us to center the view around our current position, assuming we have one, which we do not have here in the 3D viewer. Now we can use the top icon, Zoom Extents. As soon as we press it, Leica Captivate instantly changes the zoom level such that all of the data fits inside the screen. Next, we can switch into a 3D view and add rotating to the zooming and panning that we have already looked at. We'll start by tapping on the view icon at the top of the toolbar. This brings out a second toolbar where we can toggle between different views. Here it is just 2D and 3D, but in some applications we might get additional views, such as an arrows view for stakeout or a cross-sectional view in an app such as roads. But for now, we'll switch into 3D and once again press the zoom icon on the toolbar so that the zooming toolbar is then shown. Here we can see we now have an additional icon, the 3D rotate icon. But instead of using that straight away, we'll just see that zooming and panning is exactly as it was with the 2D view. Once we've done that, it is time that we use the 3D rotate functionality. Here we can see that whenever we drag across the screen, we're no longer panning or zooming, instead we are rotating our view around the data. Next, we can look at how we configure the points and lines that we see. We do this by using the bottom icon on the toolbar, the settings icon, and then with the toolbar that has appeared, we can use the display functionality. When we click this, we are taken to the object display screen, where we have different tabs to allow us to configure how different types of objects are displayed. We'll start on the first tab, Points. Here we can choose, first of all, if the points are being displayed, but then also if we display the IDs, the codes, or heights alongside the points as text. We'll turn on the IDs and then press OK to return to the 3D viewer. Back in the viewer, we can zoom in and take a look at these IDs and see how they are displayed alongside our points. One of the first things we notice is that the point symbols and the text alongside the points is actually scaled. So we can tell straight away which points are closer to our viewing position and which points are further away. Another thing to notice is how Leica Captivate intelligently selects which text to display. Examples of this are shown on screen, where Leica Captivate knows not to display text that would be hidden behind other text. This intelligence makes the entire dataset easier to view and interpret, because we do not end up with a mess of text covering the screen and preventing us from seeing the data or being able to read the text itself. Now let's return to the Objects Display configuration and move to the Lines tab. Here we can turn on the display of lines by checking the box, and then we can press OK to return to the 3D viewer. Once we are here, we straight away notice that the lines are now displayed, so as we zoom out and rotate around, we find our data much easier to understand, and now we're looking at a better representation of reality. Next, we can take a look at how we can configure the display of scans, DTMs, and alignments. We can look at these objects individually, one after the other, but for each of them, we have to first return to the Object Display configuration. We'll start by going to the Scans tab and turning on Scans. We then get the chance to choose what color to make our scans. Either the true color coming through from any images that we have taken with the scans, or have the scan colored by intensity, or alternatively have a single color for the entire point cloud from a scan. We'll leave it with true color and then we'll take a look at the next option. Here we can control if we want the points in our point cloud to be either small or large. Using the large setting allows us to make less dense point clouds easier to see and to interpret. However, in this case, we'll leave it set to small and press OK to return to the 3D viewer, where we can now see that our scans are visible and live. So, as we rotate the view slightly, we can see that this virtual world really does represent the reality of the site. Next, we can return to the Object Display configuration, and this time go to the DTM tab. Here, we can select to turn on our digital terrain models, and even configure the color that they will be displayed in. Once we've done that, we can press OK to again return to the 3D viewer. And now we can see that our triangles from a digital terrain model are visible within the viewer, enabling us to visualize and understand where a design or a previously surveyed surface is or should be. Defining the DTM model that is displayed is actually part of data management, and as such is covered in a separate video on working jobs and design data. Also covered in that video is a selection of road, rail, or tunnel data, in other words, design data with alignments in. And alignments is what we will now look at. So again, we go back to our Object Display configuration, and this time we'll go to the Alignments tab. Here, we simply tick the checkbox to turn alignments on, and then press OK to return to the 3D viewer once again. Now that we're back in the viewer, with the alignment turned on, we can rotate our view and take a look at this alignment. In this case, it is a continuation of the existing railway line as we can see here. However, to see it even more clearly, we should rotate the view to face north, where we can now see the alignment extending off beyond the scans and into the distance. Next, we can take a look at a 3D viewer feature called the Distance Filter. To do this, we'll switch to a different job and then enter back into the 3D viewer app. Here, we can see that we have a site containing points, lines, and scan information for a car park, a road, and the surrounding buildings. As we rotate the viewer around the site, we can see we have a lot of information both close to us and also off into the distance. And this is where the distance filter can be used, so that we're only looking at a slice of the data at any one time. We use the settings button on the first toolbar, and then the distance filter button on the second toolbar. This provides us with a slider where we can control the minimum and the maximum distance from the viewpoint that we want to see data for. As we change these amounts, we can see that our data is being filtered in real time, and if we then rotate our view, we can see that the filter really is live as the data in our screen updates as we rotate. For now, we can just reset our filter to its full extent, but it really doesn't take much imagination to start thinking of use cases for this, such as looking at only a certain section of an alignment or at a certain floor of a multi-story building. Next, we can take a look at selecting and deselecting objects in the 3D viewer. The process for this really is as simple as tapping on the object which we wish to select or to deselect. And of course, we can have multiple objects selected at the same time if we want. Now, there will be some cases where there are multiple objects close together, and as such, Leica Captivate won't be able to automatically tell which one we meant to select. When this happens, we're presented with all the possible objects so that we can confirm which one we meant to select or deselect. The data we select doesn't just have to be points. It could also be a line, as shown here, or an alignment, or even data from a DXF. Next, we'll look at a method which allows us to select multiple objects at once, the selection window. Here, we use the settings icon from the first toolbar, and then use the selection window icon from the second. Now, we're able to define what objects to select using the window. If we create the window from left to right, then only the objects completely inside that window will be selected. Let's now clear that selection by pressing and holding on the screen, and then selecting Clear Objects from the context menu. And now we can create the window slightly differently. This time, although we'll do approximately the same window, we'll do it from right to left. This creates a window that not only selects the objects that are completely inside it, but also any object that intersects with its boundary. Now that we've seen this, we can clear our selection. To do that, we once again press and hold on the map to bring up the context-specific menu, but before we press clear, we can explain a bit more about the context-specific menu. Depending on what is selected when we bring up this menu, the content of the menu changes. As we had multiple different object types selected when we invoke this menu, here we only have the options for delete or clear, so we will clear. And then this time we'll try it again with just one point selected. Now when we press and hold, we can see that the context menu is giving us a lot more options. In fact, it is giving us a lot more power. And we can use this whether we have selected points, lines, alignments, or data from our DXF files and do useful and common functions such as importing DXF data or jumping into an app, such as stake if we selected points, or some reference line or road functionality if we had selected a line or an alignment. Now that we have seen how we can interact with our data and how the viewer helps Leica Captivate blur the line between the virtual world and the real world in 3D, it makes sense to take a look at how we can do the same in 2D. And we'll do this using a background image. We'll continue with the same job as before, but this time in a 2D plan view. We'll then zoom in and turn off some IDs to make it even easier to see the huge impact that turning on a background image can really have. So now we'll enter into our object display configuration again, and then on the points tab, turn off the point IDs, and on the lines tab, turn off the line IDs. With that done, we can move on to the background images tab. Here, we'll select to use an image and then enter into the screen where we can choose which image we want to use. In our case, we only have one image, but as we can tell, if we had multiple images in this list, we'd then be able to select which one we want to use. With this confirmed, we can press OK, and then OK again to return to the 3D viewer. Once we're back in the viewer, we can zoom and pan around and really see that even in 2D, Leica Captivate is helping us to better understand the data and the site that we're working on. With that finished, we can now bring this video to a close, but it is worth noting that many other videos, such as the stake videos or the DXF videos, also cover some 3D viewer functionality.